Good afternoon, everyone here and online. Thanks for coming to today's seminar. Today we have Dr. Billy Sam to present the application of psychophysiological methods in business and beyond. Dr. Billy is an associate professor at the School of Management and Marketing at Curtin University. His research has been based on the study of motion and the application of psychophysiological methodology in multiple disciplines, including marketing, consumer psychology, health, and robotics. He is also the lead of Consumer Research Lab, which specializes in the use of biometric measures such as eye tracking, facial expression, and brainwave analysis to conduct consumer research. He has also provided consultation to various industry partners such as HBS, Lotterywest, Redbull, and RAC. Okay, thank you for Billy.
No, thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. So hello, everyone. Welcome, I guess, to this session, and thank you, Patrick, for inviting me back here. I think 1 year ago, I was here doing some demonstration of psychophysiological method. Today, we didn't bring in any of the equipment, and I think FOWI is actually starting to build their own biometric lab, so it will be quite interesting. So today, I focused the presentation on what we have been doing in the Consumer Research Lab, which is a research facility in Bentley campus. And we specialize in the use of biometrics in actually answering some of the high-value industry problems. And we'll present some of the work that we have done, the work that we can share, and verbally share with you some of the work that we can't share in some sense. So as you can see, and I do welcome, I guess, the online people. I couldn't see you, but hopefully you can see me. So thank you for the introduction. I won't go through this too much, but as Frank said, I'm an associate professor in the School of Management and Marketing, so we're one big family now, since I was from School of Marketing. But I've been known to a lot of people. I'm actually a psychologist by training. So I actually specialize in social neuroscience at UQ, and then neuropsychology actually at UQ and Griffith as well, before I joined Curtin about 5.5 years ago. Once I joined Curtin, I actually situated myself in marketing, and so very much a consumer psychologist by training, although I know I'm not accredited, so I can't actually label myself as a consumer psychologist. But in some sense, my passion is on consumer psychology and understanding decision making. But once I went into the business world, there was quite a few different applications of biometrics that have drawn me to different other things, and we'll talk about that later on. Now, today I'll focus my presentation on the Consumer Research Lab, which is probably a pseudo team. So we're not really a formalized team like FOWI. We're probably just myself who actually guides the Consumer Research Lab. We have about 10 to 12, we call it research specialists or senior research specialists, basically casual RAs that works on different projects and industry partners with me. And also every now and then we'll have some academics that comes and collaborate with us. So this is actually 2016. That was the first lab that we set up. So this was actually just in the office. So you can see the renovation, the equipment is actually not very good. So what you can actually see here is a participant wearing basically most of the psychophys equipment that we have. So facial expression, we have FEMG or facial electromyography, skin inductance measure, the fingers, heart rate that you can't actually see below the shirts. We actually have the emotive brainwave headset if we're looking at brainwave frequency. However, if we're looking at ERPs, emotive headsets are probably not the most accurate one. So we have our own BioPack EEG headset. You can actually see this is an office space in 2016, and we expanded. Unfortunately, as you guys would probably know, real estate in university are very, very hard to come by, probably even harder to come by Apple Cross. We're quite fortunate now that we moved into basically a room where we have at least 3 testing stations. We're expanding into one of the classroom. Yes, it is a very difficult endeavor to actually convince university to give us teaching space. But this is basically in FOWI 7 in the Bentley campus. So you can actually see some of the equipment that have been shown. These are most of the mobile equipment because the lab equipment are too scary in some sense. Cables everywhere, and although they are quite wireless now. You can actually see how we actually conduct some of the research, but basically we're now expanding into basically the classroom next door, and hopefully we'll have about 6 to 7 testing stations and an area that can fit about 2 VR simulator that can be going together and have basically all the psychophys equipment for every single testing station already. So in a nutshell, the Consumer Research Lab specializes in pretty much every single neuropsychological methodology apart from fMRI, simply because an fMRI costs $3 million and running an fMRI costs $2 million. And I don't think I have enough pool like FOWI to actually convince the VC to give us an fMRI machine and a technician to run it every day. So the Consumer Research Lab specializes in eye tracking, both mobile and fixed. So every single psychophys measure that we have, we can do it in store or mobile. So you can do it like in a tourism destination, or even do it in a particular place in time, or it could be in the lab. So we have both eye trackers for the computers and eye tracking glasses. We also specialize in cardiac and electrodermal activity, so that's heart rate and skin inductance. Emotional expression, so you show some of the FEMG sensors that we have, so we can actually look at zygomatic or corrugator muscles to look at positive and negative emotions, or positive negative implicit attitude, although those who really follow IAT studies, you would know that it's not really a good method anymore. So that's probably the psychophys side of things. I'm not too sure whether it really measures implicit attitude, but we can debate that later on. But also brainwave and F-nerve. So with brainwave, we have the really basic one, the emotive one, which look at frequency. It's accurate enough to look at frequency, but we also have the ERP headsets. We only have 2 of them in the lab, but we also have 1 set of what we call F-nerve, basically using near-infrared lights to actually look at cortical activities to the frontal cortex. So without an fMRI, we can't do much, but with F-nerve, you can actually look at decision-making process, executive functions, so on and so forth in the frontal lobe. We also recently, I think in the past 2 to 3 years, I guess the hot topic of VR and immersive technology, and I guess the rise of Hive in a sense in Curtin, we also got into immersive technology because a lot of people really wanted to implement biometric measure into VR simulation, especially some of the work that we're doing with Parachute. Now, I'm not going to tell you who it is, but you would know if it's Parachute who it is. Right? But yes, I can't say it, but yes. You guys also do a bit of work with them anyway. Digital marketing analytics. So because I also am a teaching academic, so unlike a lot of you here, I'm actually teaching a research academic. So I also teach the digital marketing side of things. So we do a bit of consultation on digital marketing, and so that was implemented into the Consumer Research Lab in understanding consumer using trackers. So if you are interested in how Google and Facebook can track you, I can show you, and it's very creepy. And yes, they do read your WhatsApp message because Facebook now owns Facebook owns WhatsApp. So a lot of people ask me, oh, I was just talking to a friend on WhatsApp about this product, and you get a product ad. That's why. So here is pretty much the team. So I haven't really included everyone here. These are probably most of the people who work in the Consumer Research Lab and most of the topics and most of the projects. So you have myself, you have Sean, Min, and Stuart, who are all academics and teaching and research academic at Curtin. Sean basically heads up the tourism projects. Min heads up the food and beverage projects. Stuart, who is from humanities, actually heads up most of the immersive technology projects. So we have a lot of VR project coming in, and he is interested in VR. And we also have Patrick, Michelle, Keegan, and Olivia, who works as research specialists, and some of them are also doing PhD in psychology, marketing, so on and so forth in our lab. And you can see we're not very organized in the sense that we don't really have the right composition and the right team picture, but you can see that we're still quite young as a research facility. But there are 4 different research streams in the Consumer Research Lab, and I'll talk to you guys about some of the industry work that we have done and how we apply psychophys into those different disciplines. And even learning the application. And in fact, 2 days ago, I was just talking to an innovation entrepreneur, and they said, hey, how come you don't use biometric to evaluate the success or estimate the success rate of innovations? I was like, well, that's actually quite interesting because they do market research, but they don't use biometric to understand consumer and the liking towards consumer-based innovation. But with the research stream, obviously, since I sit in the former School of Marketing, now School of Management and Marketing, we do a lot of branding and marketing for a number of big corporations. Obviously, just like FOWI, we don't want to consider ourselves as a consultant. So we actually do scholarly research that benefits or have industry outcome for a lot of the local brands and also international brands. We have a stream of research that really focuses on food and beverage, simply because there is a very big investment into agriculture and food and beverage. So we're looking at, for example, working with the crop industry to look at cereal and value-added products, export markets for fresh pork meats and fresh beef meats, so on and so forth. But we also have recently added on a safety stream. More so of work that we're going to show you with Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attraction, looking at visitor safety and tourist safety. How do we safeguard and make sure that tourists and visitors are safe, and how do we make sure that that also engages them in a positive way? And obviously, last but not least, the innovation and immersive technology stream. First of all, we'll look at branding and marketing. So this is probably the bread and butter and the start of Consumer Research Lab, at least at Curtin. Before that, I was actually working more so in the health and psychology setting, looking at very fundamental research in looking at how to use biometrics as a proxy measure of particular processes such as attention, cognitive processing, so on and so forth. But at Curtin University in the Consumer Research Lab, we do quite a bit of work in the branding and marketing asset space. So for example, REC, if you have ever seen, and still on TVC actually, that was about 2 years ago, the Power of Membership TVC. In fact, we were actually the one who started the Power of Membership concept with them. So at that time, they were quite interested. I've been known to a lot of you if you are in Perth and actually other REC subsidiary, you will find that a lot of the ads have the yellow branding element, but no one actually knows before this ad what it means. It actually means that if you are an RSC member, the yellow branding element actually suggests that these are the benefits that you get. So for instance, the cinema ticket, you can get a discount on it. Your bumper, because as a member, you get discount fix if you crash or whatever. So what we actually did was we actually used eye tracking and obviously other biometric measures to look at this so-called yellow branding element. And I still haven't got a name out of it. They call it the Power of Membership element. And we found that no one actually paid attention to it. Eye tracking study shows that no one paid attention to it. And they're like, oh, really? We have been using it for the past 5 years. That was about 2018, 2019. And we probably spent quite a lot of money actually trying to build that up because, building up RAC membership benefits, promoting it, not explicitly, but implicitly. And I said, yeah, no one is paying attention to it. And so they said, so how do we do it? And so obviously we as a university, we don't come up with the creative concept. They went to the creative agency and go, okay, so we want to have a RAC helicopter because that's one of the biggest membership benefit in a sense, because I don't know if you guys know, if you guys are RAC members, you guys should be very proud because that's what the ad about. It's about building membership pride on, I sponsored that helicopter that saved life in WA and rescue people. And so if you remember the ad, it was pretty much about, the helicopter and the yellow branding element. We basically then reassessed the awareness or attention, and we found that there was a significant increase in people looking at those yellow branding elements, suggesting that that specific campaign, although it costs about 500 to 600K to produce, did actually make sure that the investment in the future actually make sure that people do recognize it. And so from that time onward, the Power of Membership concept has been expanded. So even if you turn on the TV now, any RAC ads, it will say the Power of Membership, and it will show you what is exactly the Power of Membership. But what's interesting here is this program of research, we also measured some of the emotional responses using biometrics. So using facial expression of FEMGs, and with some algorithm that actually combines heart rate and skin inductance, we know that there is particular proxy measure of pride. So in fact, if you actually ask someone, how proud are you towards RAC, you'll be like, yeah, 1 out of 7, 5. So it's actually not very accurate in a sense. So what we did was we actually created this proxy measure, although it's not really a scale establishment kind of paper, but we actually measured second by second how people actually feel proud to be looking at this RAC ads. And we actually identify particular elements, and specifically, the life-saving elements, the helicopter when the talent was looking up at the skies. And what we actually show is that specific elements within the TVC actually evoke pride. Now, you might ask me, so how does that work in marketing? Well, they actually didn't show us the fully produced ad, because in order for you to get this ad done, it will probably be 400, 500K of investment. So we actually came in when there was some animatics. So spend 10K on the animatics. From a 2-minute TVC, which there's no 2-minute TVC, we can tell you exactly which element and which second works, which is effective, what actually evoke positive emotion or actually negative emotion. So for example, in safety, we want to evoke fear, and so on and so forth, and allowing us to actually use second by second and element by element analysis on these marketing and branding assets. One of the key examples is Lotterywest, and as Curtin University, we can't do anything on gambling, and therefore we didn't do anything on gambling. We only did the branding. So we want to make sure that people actually have a positive response to the branding of Lotterywest and the support of Lotterywest. And so you can actually see it is exactly the same methodology applied differently. We're looking at now positive emotional resonance. And we can do it by second, and obviously we test for statistical significance, control for all these statistical jargon that I'm not going to bore you guys with, you guys would know, and identify trigger points of positive emotions. And by actually identifying these imageries, you can actually see the end results.
Just keep running.
Okay, so you can see how, from a animatics perspective, we told them, these are the positive emotional resonance elements or concepts, and they basically have used them in the final production, making sure that before you even deposit 400 to 500K in producing the TVC and putting, let's say, $2 million of advertising budget into it, we already make sure that some of the elements that doesn't work, it's gone. The ones that works, you actually emphasize on it. And in fact, you could also identify particular concepts or marketing concept. In simple term, it's basically marketing ideas. What ideas works? And so, in fact, in this project, we actually identify a number of different elements that the creative agency thinks it works. And we go, well, actually, people have negative emotional resonance to it. The ad was supposedly a poem. No one understood it. And so we can actually test all these execution for corporations, so on and so forth. We could also apply it into websites. I guess a lot of you would probably be using websites every day. So we have applied this to website usability or user experience. So I don't think I need to explain which one is a good design, which one is a bad design. Eye tracking data show that this is definitely a bad design. You look everywhere and you can't find the right navigation button or navigation pathway. It is actually in red. So this task, so we designed the tasks for this prototype, and these are again point and click prototype. So they don't take 6 months, 500K, $1 million of budget to create. It only takes 2 weeks for a team of digital marketing agency or developer to actually get a, I guess, a prototype done up and actually show navigation structure. Is it really navigating properly, so on and so forth. Obviously, biometrics is only part of this research. However, what's interesting here is, apart from using eye tracking, facial expression, and all these other things, in this research, we actually use pupillometry. And from a lot, I guess, most of us sitting here are psychologists. We have heard that, pupil dilation, if you control it properly, actually is a proxy measure of cognitive processing. So by actually combining facial expression and pupillometry, we can actually look at, in a sense, a state of confusion. So when I'm exerting a lot of cognitive load and I have a confusing face, basically, and there is, then it is confusion. And in a website design perspective, in a branding perspective, you don't want your clients or customers to be confused, especially in the My HBF portal, where you're probably looking at claims, you're probably looking at upselling your clients, so on and so forth. And so you can actually see that, this design really doesn't work. And by the way, the name is anonymous, so it's not actually the name of the participant. And you can actually see, if you complete that task, you only have one way to actually do it, which is this button. And it took X amount of duration and also a lot of basically eye-rolling time onto other different places. Whereas on here, it's really easy to understand. But with the confusion measure, we could also identify points of confusion. And so we identify that, for instance, they're confused about the category of extras. So when people would ask to check the extra, they're like, I don't understand these extra. Like, how does that work? What is the layout? Why do I need to click on the button to check my extras? When we ask them to, like for instance, a very simple design, for example, $40 used and $560 remaining, people are unsure to recall if I ask them to check the extra, how much money is left in your extra, although it might be easy to understand in that point in time. But for that respondent, it seems like on average, respondents were unable to really process those information. And also basically be unable to see other extras. So I guess if you're a HBF member, you didn't see that, but in the prototype, you basically have to click on the extra and go, okay, I have $500 remaining in glasses. Go back, $600 remaining in physio. And basically, that doesn't only causes what we call friction in marketing, but also confusion, because people will start getting annoyed. I want to check on one page how much extra I have for every single category. You might think that's quite a minor change. However, you can actually see user experience changes significantly. And if we are looking at customer loyalty, and you can actually see that, well, research that HBF had done, digital experience and customer loyalty is a very high correlation, and therefore they really want to get their digital online experience right. And that's also why if you're a HBF, now you have your HBF card on your Apple Wallet. So since it's my client, I would call it out. HBF is probably the best insurance company because every time I present or convince an industry partner, they will be, do you have any correlation with sales data? I'll be like, if I can correlate my biometric measure with sales data, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'll be a billionaire like Microsoft. No, I can't actually predict sales data. Sales data has all these other external factors, right? But obviously, we also have invested quite a strategic position into food and beverage marketing, simply because when we look at sensory kind of responses, especially the tastes and smells, so on and so forth, they're quite subjective. And it's very difficult for someone to say, do you like it or do you want it? So for instance, if I give you an apple and I say, do you like apple? You might go, yeah, 6 out of 7, I like apple. I give you chocolate, you might go, yeah, I'm 6 out of 7 like chocolate. I give you apple and chocolate, does that mean that, you're going to eat that apple? Not really, right? And so self-reported measure in this case can't really distinguish the liking and wanting mechanism. And so from that case, how do we actually do that? Well, facial expression is quite an objective measure. So when you present apple and chocolate together, now if you measure facial expression, can you actually distinguish the liking or the positive emotion that associate with each of the stimuli? Now, obviously that's an example. However, we also identify, and we didn't get permission to share any pictures, and therefore it's kind of very rudimentary. This is actually just Patrick, and we just go, ABC, because we didn't have any pictures for the commercial partner wouldn't want us to show. But basically, we actually consulted for truffle producers WA. Unbeknown to all of you guys, our WA truffle producer is actually the 3rd largest producer of truffle in the whole world. And we're actually competing with Spain and all those people. And that is also why in Perth, you actually get that season of truffle, and everywhere in restaurant is truffle, because we actually produce a lot of them. And we actually produce high quality truffles. And obviously, it's also benefiting. You know, if you consult for a truffle producer, you'd probably get some truffle products. But what's interesting here is, unbeknown to a lot of people as well, you probably have truffle oil at home. You have used truffle oil. Do you know that 100% of truffle oil that is in the market right now are artificial truffle aroma? So they're not actually natural truffle. The aroma comes from cabbages, fermented cabbages like kimchi. I also learned a lot from food producers. A lot of disgusting things as well, but not truffle. Unbeknown to a lot of consumers, a lot of the truffle product that you're exposed to are actually artificial. If you're a natural truffle producer, you're actually losing out on the market. And so we actually came out and actually went to some consumer and actually try and see if we could do a triangle test. In a triangle test or food science test, we basically go, we give you 3 samples. 1 sample is a discrete one. 2 samples is exactly the same. Your task is to actually identify which one is the odd one out. And we found that from a behavioral measure, you can actually accurately distinguish natural truffle aroma or natural truffle product versus artificial truffle product. However, when we use biometric measure and when you're consuming, and here is why biometric measure is quite important, because you might be actually, you might use self-reported measure, you get them to try the natural truffle, they rate on a 1 to 7 scale, and then the natural truffle, and then you get rated on 1 to 7 scale. However, in a biometric setting, you can literally go, when they put it in the mouth and they're already tasting it, what is the positive emotion? And so you can literally pinpoint that exact moment where the stimuli is presented, instead of 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 30 seconds after the stimulus presentation. And we found that actually there is no specific liking towards artificial truffle aroma and natural truffle aroma. There's no significant differences. Although I have been always saying, it's null hypothesis testing, you can't really interpret null hypothesis, but from a managerial perspective, yes, there's no significant differences. Okay? And in that case, what's interesting here is truffle producers, or at least natural truffle producers, have this this chance of actually educating consumers, because we probably are quite used to artificial truffle aromas, which are quite different to natural truffle aromas. And in order for us to actually educate consumers, they can't have prior liking towards the artificial truffle aroma. If they already have prior liking, then it's very hard to swing that preference to natural truffle. And so now we're doing a bit of work on how do we actually educate consumers about truffle aromas, truffle smell. In fact, this has also been, I guess, extended to, let's say, science and engineering. So in science and engineering, they're doing some encapsulation method to keep the shelf life of truffle. And what we're doing is, if they smell the encapsulation using chemical to encapsulate them, does consumer liking varies based on different encapsulations, so on and so forth. But obviously, you could also apply it into packaging. So basically, we show truffle pate or truffle products with other competitive products that are not truffle or that are truffle from different countries, so on and so forth. Obviously, it's not showing as this, it's a proper product shelf. But we show that people actually, at least in WA, they are very geared towards looking at products that are from WA. And they don't really look into basically the country of origin a lot. However, they do pay attention to keywords like natural, genuine, so on and so forth. Obviously, we also did work with wine since we're in WA, and we actually show by using biometric measure, simply putting the same wine in a bottle, you are 30% more willing to pay more, or sorry, you're willing to pay 30% more for a bottle of wine. So I always say this, right? Unbeknown to a lot of people, premium wine doesn't make money for winery. The cheap wine that worth $10 to $20, that's where they make money. Why? Because scale of economy, right? And if I can just push that by 10 cents, I'm giving back $5 million to the industry every year. If I can push that up to 50 cents, how much is that? And therefore, we are here to kind of inform these high value decisions. How do we actually squeeze that 50 cents more per bottle for that $10 and actually return at least $6–7 million into the industry every year so that we can actually be sustainable? Then we also have the safety and visitor experience. And this is actually quite a recent project. Funny enough, it was more so because I was working with tourism and DBCA, or Department of Biodiversity and Conservation and Attraction, came to me and said, we actually want to apply the same thing as tourist destination, but in a safety context. But to give you a little bit of an understanding of this stream, we also did some safety. You can see that I tried to now put project into different streams. Obviously, there's a few other things, but understanding of financial products. So here, about safety, but more so your financial safety. This is a financial product that we have done 1.5 years ago with Smooth Retirement, basically showing how people actually understand financial products. And what's interesting is basically what we're saying is if you do something, and I can't tell you what that something is, your retirement plan is much more stable and your income is much more stable. However, if you don't, your income, or at least your retirement plan, will actually drop off. Now, what's interesting here is you never see the people actually understanding this growth. In fact, no one actually pay attention to that point. The focal point of interest to convince you to actually switch to a particular thing that will help you make sure you actually have a more stable income when you retire. None. And therefore, we actually told the industry partner, look, if you want to market to people, you really wanted to help them in retirement, you're not going to convince them by showing them the graph. You're definitely not going to convince them by showing them the numbers. You have to present them and promote them and communicate them in a more simpler way, so on and so forth. But obviously, we also have the visitor experience. So this is where we are looking at tourist destination and safety, whereby you can actually see the mobile eye tracking glasses. We can track second by second and places by places where people are looking at. Do they actually look at the safety information or the safety signs? Do they actually pay attention to it? And in the same time, apart from safety, there's one big thing that's actually work against us. So Tourism WA, as a big corporation, would like to push visitors to go to tourist destination. As the manager or the DBCA who manages the park will make sure that there's safety. Imagine if you go to a park and you see warning sign and how many people died here before and poisonous, I don't know, snakes ahead. Are you going to really enjoy your visit? And therefore, we actually combine these two government departments and go, look, we can make sure the safety signs are being paid attention to, people process them, but also that doesn't actually affect visitor experience. Because with biometrics, we can calculate or estimate second by second what is the positive and negative responses, and whether they engage, whether so on and so forth, using skin inductance and heart rate. And so what we actually show is, for instance, we can map where in the location and where do people pay attention when they have a positive visitor experience, and when they're looking at safety signs, or if there's more safety signs, is that going to really impact visitor experience, so on and so forth. Obviously, very different to a number of different industry projects where we don't really come in and actually create the concept for them. DBCA really got interested when we presented them with some of the scholarly pieces and advice and theories about how to communicate better safety communication. So we're currently in a 3-year kind of partnership and actually looking at optimizing the safety communication. And so this is probably not really into the biometrics, but what we actually did, we applied marketing and psychological theory and shows that obviously when you really want to change someone's behavior, you need to pay attention to it. You need to be interested in a particular message. It's health psychology, right? Awareness, interest, I don't even recall those other steps towards intention, right? And then you want to prevent them from relapse. But you can actually go, okay, well, attention, interest, search, design, and comprehension. What the original idea was, we're just going to scare the hell out of people. So we're going to go to the TBC and go, you shouldn't come to the park because you'll die by, you fall from the rock and if you go rock fishing without a life vest, 80% chance you're going to slip away and you're going to die, and all this kind of thing. And I go, whoa, 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 hold your horses, right? It's like, you're not going to convince anyone by using fear appeal. In fact, fear appeal only works for, really, really salient health things, right? And we know from health psychology, it doesn't always work. So what we actually show them is, well, maybe what you actually need to do is you need to start educating them. Instead of actually scaring the hell out of them, what are the preventive measures? So we're actually going to increase control efficacy. So self-efficacy or control efficacy to make sure that people actually don't do, stupid decisions. So for instance, going into the park with slippers, going into a class 4 trail with no water, going into a remote area without telling anyone, so on and so forth. And so we came up with basically the concept. And in fact, I think I charged very little because a creative agency would have charged about 100K for a creative concept. I probably only charged them like 20K, so not a very good economic value, but good that it's impactful in the sense that they actually took on. So in October, you'll see a new TVC that follows the same creative concept. So for instance, we tell them, you just basically show them the behavior. So, do we need a map? Nah, it's fine. Can we actually walk through this with a safety sign that says don't walk? And to be honest, when we look at the data, we actually see that a lot of people actually ignores it because of the Instagrammable photos. And so, it's fine. Do we need to bring water? Nah, it's fine. And then you show them what's the consequence and actually make sure that, and that's marketing theory, make sure that you direct all the traffic into a place where they can get resources. There's no point of actually telling them that, this is dangerous, and not giving them any other educational information. And so we actually are going to have a website where you can actually select your activities that you're going to do. So for example, hiking in Mount Augusta, it tells you, you better bring, 4 liters of water per person if you go onto this trail. And so showing, this kind of framework actually allows us to not only use biometric to track, for example, how effective is safety signs, how effective is TVC communication, but also allowing the industry partner, or at least DBCA, to actually understand, how what we call above the line and below the line marketing actually works. And obviously, we have innovation and immersive technology. So, but we have done a lot of work, and it all actually started off with Stuart, who is the lead on all these immersive technology, VR research. He was interested in game design. I'm not really a gamer, but he came to me and said, I'm actually really interested in game design. I said, sure, let's go find an industry partner who would like to partner with us. And we found Horizon Sunshine. Those of you who know VR gaming know. Well, it's a zombie game. So basically what we did was we got gamers to come in and play the new version of Horizon Sunshine. And while they're doing that, you can see we're looking at fear using biometric measure. While they're doing it, they're also having some skin inductance, heart rate measures to look at engagement. And if you haven't played this VR zombie game, I would really encourage you to. It's actually quite fun. But you can see how this works. So basically, what we were trying to do is we're trying to identify gameplay that is engaging, gameplay that is fearful and therefore enjoyment. And also, we also have this theoretical kind of thing where we actually want to test, because Stuart is actually from humanities, so the creative media people, they're like, does actually playing violent game make you more violent? So, I don't know how he got the fix for it, but we basically immerse people to play 40 minutes of this VR game, really gory VR game, with bloods and zombies and everything. And then we measure the violence level at the end. And then we followed up 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, 30 days. And we show that no, playing violent video game doesn't make you more violent. And in fact, that's probably the recent consensus in literature. In fact, a lot of researchers from creative media have hypothesized that the more you play, the more you desensitize, and therefore the more you are violent. However, there is research, I think there was 1+1 recently in 2021 from UQ that shows that really, not really, there's no correlation in playing violent game and being more violent or aggressive, so on and so forth. We also have applied this into educational setting, and in fact, a lot of educational VR. So we actually developed the first marketing VR learning simulation. However, we basically gave it up. Why? Because we actually developed a prototype with a industry partner virtual guest. So basically, it's kind of delivering what we will teach marketers or potential marketers. This is how you, in a sense, manipulate consumer. So for instance, I don't know if you guys know, when you walk into Coles, about 5 years ago, you'll get that bakery smell. But not every Coles have that bakery smell. That doesn't have a bakery. And they actually got fined 5 years ago because the bakery smell had been shown scientifically to actually open up your appetite, and therefore, the more hungry you are, the more likely you're going to spend. And actually, AAAC or ACCC actually go, well, actually, no, you're infusing these smell. You don't have a bakery inside, so no, you cannot do that. And if you're interested, in fact, new cars, new car smell, they are not real. There's no new car smell. It's infused by the manufacturer. And so what we're teaching them is going through this VR marketing simulation. We show them these content that usually get paid play on a video, so on and so forth, or a lecture slide. And we actually did it, and we played a video that mimics the content. We show that from biometric measure, people really enjoy the VR simulation. They're really immersed in them. Learning attitude goes up. However, learning performance goes down significantly. So when we give them a quiz, which we extracted from the blue unit, and give them the quiz, the performance level actually gone down, showing you that VR learning simulation might not be a hype. It might actually distract people and actually makes people not perform well on a quiz, on an exam later on. And so what we actually did was we actually showed that, and we basically, one of the recommendations is obviously to use the VR simulation only for a supplementary resource. We also did the same thing with Dementia Training Australia. They spent probably about $2 million in designing a dementia training simulation. We tested that for them, and we showed that actually there's no significant effect. Even in the self-reported measure, if you're looking at dementia, person-centered care, empathy and all those kind of things, there's no significant difference in trained nurses. Then we replicate the whole study with nursing students. And we found that for biometric measure, they're more emotional. So VR is more emotional, more immersive. And that actually leads to higher empathy and higher level of person-centered care, or at least approach, so on and so forth. Suggesting that, again, in this environment, with a trained nurse, they already seen it. You don't need VR to actually make them more effective or more emotional. And therefore, that doesn't change the practices. However, if it's a nursing student, they have not had that experience. And therefore, the more immersive it is, the more emotional it is, the more they learn from it, and therefore, the more they actually develop these empathetic skills and also person-centered approach or practices. I will skip this one because I think we're running out of time. But also, obviously, those are just some of the projects that we're doing. And I'm also quite interested in AI and human interaction. So for instance, we haven't worked with Google, although it might be a very good and cashed up industry partner that we want to touch on. But we actually did some academic studies to actually look at, how do we actually design AI conversation? So what happens if the AI is a human natural voice versus currently the human artificial voice? What happens if I make the voice a little bit more warmer? We have this in psychology, warmth and confidence, right? But we show that consumer does not like a warm AI, does not like a human AI that speaks like a human. They want the artificiality in there. And we actually demonstrate that using facial expression and FEMG again, skin inductance and heart rate to even look at stress. People are actually stressful when you engage them in an AI environment, and it's actually including social tasks. So social tasks like, if you go, okay, Google, I love you, they actually have a very good comeback and all these social tasks, that actually stresses people out. But what's interesting is we also apply this to, I would say my previous life, although I'm actually quite young, but my previous life was actually in Griffith doing robotic design. So how do we design robots where people with dementia can engage with, where nursing staff can engage with, where patients feel comfortable in actually being operated on by AI or robotics, so on and so forth. And so we're still continuing those studies. We currently use a lot of the biometric measure, especially with people with dementia. It's hard to get self-reported measure from them, and therefore we use them to actually look at satisfaction, positive emotion, negative emotion, agitation, so on and so forth. So yes, so that's the general summary of the Consumer Research Lab, and hopefully, as I said, I would love to talk to you guys if you guys have any application of it. I was actually just talking to HBF the other day, and they said, look, what happened if we actually apply it when there's an organizational change? So how do we make sure that people are still satisfied? I was like, you can use biometrics to look at, what strategy makes people much more, I don't know, resilient and more positive towards organizational change, so on and so forth. So we'll be keen to actually look at some of these high-value decisions, right? I mean, you guys are the experts. In organization change, employee empowerment, these are really high-value decision-making. It costs a lot of money, but also a lot of money in return in efficacy and effectiveness, so on and so forth. So yes, thank you.
I just thought it was a great presentation, by the way. I don't have a question, but it was super interesting.
Oh, thank you.
It's really cool to see the breadth of stuff, because I mean, coming from psych, and I only think of like this kind of stuff, because you're sitting in front of a computer and you're really bored. It's just like, it's really cool to see the application.
Thank you. I mean, I would say I'm not a very good academic because I'm not a very good finisher, because I always go, oh, that idea sounds good. Let's do it. This idea also sounds good. Let's try and do it. And that's why we have these many streams of research. But yes, I do agree. I really like the application side of things, and so I really focus on working on industry problems and these type of challenges that industry partners might have, and that's the interesting part of, I guess, the research that we do.
I'm really interested. Thanks for that presentation. Sorry, I should say that was great. Great high-level overview of what we're doing. Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm interested in some of the practicalities. Like, what kind of sample sizes do you need to get a reliable function, like your emotional response function, when someone's watching in person?
It's probably similar to a lot of those rule of thumb. So we always, if there's no a priori power analysis that we could do, we pretty much just stick with 30 per cell and actually look into 30 per cell. Although when you talk to, like, for instance, big corporation who is more familiar with market research of like 10 people per cell, when you try to convince them, you actually need 30 people, and they'll go, nah, it's okay, we can do 10. And always when I present those findings, then I go, well, looking at the power post-hoc power analysis, this is actually not very reliable, but here is the conclusion. But I would say rule of thumb is still 30 per cell. However, what we actually found was that self-reported measure and biometrics, from our experience of Psychophys is actually more objective in a sense, and therefore the variance is actually not that high. So for instance, to give you a good example is engagement measure. If we're looking at heart rate, we're actually looking at a difference of maybe 1 beat per minute of changes of condition A versus condition B, and it's already significant. Whereas in a self-reported measure, you have a 1 to 7 scale, 1 to 10 scale, and you're looking at a standard deviation of 1.5. And that's a big difference. For someone to say 4 and to someone to say 7, it's actually quite a big difference. Whereas heart rate is quite, the variation is quite small. And so because we also calibrated based on baseline and the person's baseline, so on and so forth, so it's quite objective and accurate in some sense. Yeah.
We have a question on that.
Oh. Has sentiment analysis on voices from customers to call center in relation to product or service been looked at by your team before? Not yet, actually. We haven't really looked at sentiment analysis on voices from customers. However, I know that there is already startup actually using voice analysis to actually look into that. But what's interesting is how, I guess, customer actually reacts to these AI voices. I think some of you guys would have experience in these AI voices, the call center, before you go into a human voice or human assistant. But it will be interesting to actually look at how do we actually identify those. But in fact, settlement analysis would be quite an interesting a topic in voice analysis, because currently I would say that the technology about 60% accuracy. So voice analysis is still not very accurate, and there's a lot of research in the past 2 years that is trying to get voice analysis to a point where it's like other psychophys measure, like FEMGs or facial expressions, so on and so forth. And Michael asks, how useful have you found ECG specifically for your inference? For ECG, we actually only use it for stress measure, so as a proxy of stress measure with skin inductance, and also engagement measure. So in marketing sense, engagement can be measured by a deceleration of heart rate and an increase in skin inductance, where stress can be an increase in skin inductance and an increase in heart rate. So we have those algorithms to actually look at engagement and stress, I guess, separately.
I'm just a bit curious. I'm just wondering, do you see this as all kind of like expect everyone to get like an average? I'm wondering if there are some differences, like the effect of different populations, which would interest me.
Yes. So what's interesting here is obviously when we are looking at, let's say, if you test a TBC, you're averaging out with 30 respondents seeing the same TBC and their heart rate and skin inductance. What we actually do is we can actually conduct a mixed model kind of analysis and actually look at within each individual, is there significant differences in terms of themselves and versus other people. We haven't really identified particular instance. I would say maybe rarely we do, but not in terms of, I guess, without any reason. So to give you an example, we have identified that there is differences in how RAC members and RAC non-members see TBC and how they view TBC in eye tracking metrics, heart rate metrics, skin inductance metric, facial expression metrics. But those are explainable because we already hypothesized that will actually has an effect. We haven't really found like, serendipitously, we actually found that, I don't know, male actually react differently to female, to RAC ads. However, if it's something like, a cosmetic ad, we already hypothesized that the target market will react this way, the non-target market will react this way, so on and so forth. I know it doesn't really answer your question. If we're looking at, within subject or at least individual differences, we haven't really branched into that area before, yes. And a question. Have you applied the attention analytic to the Curtin learning management system teaching? Not really. However, I have actually, well, can I share this? Curtin Marketing have tried to commission the Consumer Research Lab to do their new website design. However, they were not able to, in a sense, fund us. And so I said, well, in that case, I don't need another project. I have more than enough projects. However, what's interesting is something that I could share because we're at Curtin. The Curtin precinct is doing some branding, and we're going to be doing some of the branding communication and testing for them. So yes. No worries. All right. Any other questions for me?
Great.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, guys.